Imagine standing on a sidewalk in New York City and you're watching a cat fall out of a window, like 32 stories up.
Right. Which sounds completely horrifying.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But it hits the pavement and somehow it survives. I mean, there is a documented medical case where a cat survived that exact drop with literally nothing more than a chipped tooth and a collapsed lung.
Wow.
Yeah. But if a human fell from that same height, the result would be, well, completely catastrophic. The physics of our natural world are incredibly bizarre, but our brains constantly they filter out that reality, replacing it with a constructed narrative that we could actually comfortably digest.
Yeah, we really operate under this illusion that our perception of the world is like a camera lens. Like it's just this unfiltered, direct recording of objective reality.
Right.
But in truth, every single thing you experience is being actively translated, edited, and honestly, sometimes completely fabricated by your own biology and culture.
So welcome to the deep dive. Today's mission for you, the listener, is to process this massive, multi-layered conversation about these invisible filters. We're exploring how the literal words you use dictate your behavior and why your memory is flawed by design.
And why that flaw is actually a huge evolutionary advantage over artificial intelligence.
Exactly. Plus, we're going to look at how modern technology is stripping away the friction that gives your life meaning. And finally, how cutting-edge science is using electricity to literally reboot the human nervous system.
It's a lot, but I think the best place to start is with the most foundational filter we use to interact with reality, which is language. We tend to view vocabulary as this passive tool, just a way to describe thoughts that already exist.
Right, like a label maker.
Exactly. But the structure of the language you use actually dictates the boundaries of your thoughts, and it heavily influences mass cultural behavior.
A perfect example of this, and I love this one, is a microeconomic constraint from about 20 years ago. It fundamentally altered how two entire nations communicate today. If you look at the early adoption of mobile messaging, in the United States, mobile carriers offered free SMS text messaging very early on.
Right.
So there was zero financial friction to sending a text. But in the UK, a single text cost like 10 to 15 pence.
Which doesn't sound like much until you scale that cost up for a teenager with a new mobile phone. Then it becomes disastrous.
Oh, totally.
There is this classic anecdote of a 14-year-old kid in the UK who got his first girlfriend. He texted her constantly for a month, and his parents were hit with an 800-pound itemized phone bill.
Wait, 800 pounds? That is insane.
Right, so that immense financial friction forced a massive behavioral adaptation. UK teenagers had to adopt elite speak, heavily shortening words, creating these obscure acronyms just to cram as much data as possible into the strict 160-character limit of a single, really expensive text message.
And the downstream effect of that is what happened when WhatsApp launched. Because it offered free messaging over a data connection, the UK and Europe adopted it instantly. I mean, out of pure financial necessity, basically overnight.
Yeah, whereas the US didn't have that specific pain point.
Exactly. So they stuck to default SMS apps like iMessage.
Yeah.
So you have this massive, enduring cultural divide in digital communication born entirely out of a forgotten cell phone tariff.
It's fascinating. But, the evolution of language isn't just driven by technology. It's also driven by human behavioral flaws. Consider the psychological drift of the word soon. Like in Anglo-Saxon, soon literally meant immediately. It meant right now.
But humans are inherently avoidant. We procrastinate.
We do.
People would be asked to do a difficult task. They'd say they were going to do it soon, and then they would just delay. And because this happened so consistently over generations, the actual definition of the word drifted to accommodate the procrastination.
Right. Soon slowly shifted to mean eventually. Society literally had to invent the modern word now to replace the urgency that human laziness had stripped away from soon.
And you can observe the exact same linguistic degradation happening right now. Like in South Africa, the phrase now is incredibly common because just saying now has lost its immediacy. So speakers have to repeat the word to signal actual urgency. The delay gets permanently baked right into the vocabulary.
Yeah, and we see these fascinating architectural differences in language everywhere. In the Malay language, they don't use a plural suffix like the letter S in English. To make something plural, they simply repeat the word.
Oh, like a table is table, but multiple tables are table.
Exactly. And in Indonesian, the word for orangutan translates mechanically to man of the forest.
Which is incredibly poetic, honestly.
It really is. Which brings us to how these verbal frameworks dictate our internal cognitive worlds. A phenomenal way to test this is the concept of aphantasia, which is the inability to visualize imagery in your mind. If I ask you, the listener, to close your eyes right now and picture an apple, what do you actually experience?
I mean, most people see a 3D object, right? Maybe red skin, a brown stem, a little reflection of light.
Yeah, exactly. But someone with aphantasia sees absolutely nothing. They process the concept entirely through words. One individual actually described their internal mechanism of counting not as visualizing numbers, but visualizing the literal letters of the word stairs.
Wait, really? The word stairs, that is wild.
Yeah. Now, compare that internal filter to someone with hyperphantasia. These are individuals who can walk into a restaurant once and years later access a flawless 3D rendering of the floor plan.
Wow.
They remember where the server door was, the angle of the bar, the lighting fixtures. Their cognitive filter is so visually intense, it basically rivals architectural software.
So this contrast really lies at the heart of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, right? Which is sometimes called linguistic determinism. It suggests that the limits of your language are the literal limits of your world. If you lack the vocabulary for a concept, you cannot fully process the concept.
That's the theory, yeah.
I do want to push back on the extreme interpretation of that, though. If linguistic determinism is absolute, does that mean teenagers today who communicate almost exclusively in acronyms and emojis are shrinking their capacity to feel complex emotions? Like, if your entire toolkit for expressing grief or joy is a skull emoji or a crying face, does your internal emotional landscape physically atrophy because the vocabulary is so restricted?
Well, it is a valid concern, assuming emojis are a reduction of language. However, linguists often argue that emojis function as a highly condensed emotional syntax.
Okay, so like a shorthand.
Right. They aren't replacing complex feelings. They are compressing complex social cues like tone of voice or facial expressions into a text-based medium that previously lacked them. It's a data compression tool, not necessarily an emotional lobotomy.
That makes a lot of sense. But regardless of how we encode our reality, whether through complex vocabulary or emojis, we rely on those memories to build our identities. But what happens when the brain's recording device is too good? That brings us to a massive misconception about human memory.
Yeah, society culturally glorifies the concept of a perfect memory. We treat photographic memory as this comic book superpower. But from an evolutionary standpoint, the inability to forget is a profound biological curse. Forgetting is not a failure of the brain. It is an active, critical mechanism for survival.
Right, because if you vividly remembered every slight, every moment of grief, every embarrassing mistake you ever made with the exact emotional intensity of the moment it happened, you would be totally paralyzed.
Exactly.
There is a famous medical case study by A.J. Luria called The Mind of a Mnemonist that looked at a man who literally lacked the neural mechanism to forget. His mind was so cluttered with trivial, vivid details that he couldn't form abstract thoughts or function in daily life.
Another stark example of the brain's filtering system breaking down is the case of Thomas McHugh. He actually suffered a severe brain aneurysm, which caused catastrophic trauma to his neural pathways.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and when he recovered, he woke up with acquired savant syndrome. This is a rare condition where brain damage unlocks these dormant, obsessive cognitive capabilities while simultaneously destroying the brain's normal filtering mechanisms. He became consumed by painting for up to 19 hours a day.
That's intense.
And he lost the ability to speak normally, conversing entirely in rhyme. The floodgates of his brain were just jammed open.
The philosopher Alain de Botton illustrates this beautifully with the story about witnessing a young, deeply infatuated couple drinking espresso at a little cafe in Paris. They're experiencing this flawless, euphoric afternoon. But de Botton's observation is that the pristine vividness of that exact memory will become their greatest source of agonizing pain if the relationship ever ends. The sharper the memory, the deeper the wound.
Absolutely. And we see the mechanical need for forgetting in professional athletics constantly. Elite athletes must actively train their brains to prune the memory of egregious errors. If a professional baseball player visibly internalizes a terrible throw, the brain associates the physical motion with emotional trauma.
And that creates the yips, right?
Exactly. It's an involuntary, conditioned physical hesitancy where the athlete literally flinches during the throw. To maintain peak performance, the memory of the failure must be chemically suppressed.
The best analogy here is that human memory operates like a self-cleaning oven. It intentionally burns off the excess residue, the daily mundane details, and the acute pain of past failures so the machine can keep functioning efficiently. Contrast that with artificial intelligence, which treats memory like an infinite digital junk drawer.
And that structural difference explains why AI struggles so profoundly with long-term context. Large language models lack a biological forgetting mechanism. When you feed an AI massive amounts of contextual data, it attempts to assign equal computational weight to all of it.
Because everything is equally important to a machine.
Right. It doesn't know how to prune for salience, the ability to instinctively know what matters and what doesn't. So because of that, it creates noise, hallucinating connections between irrelevant data points. Human brains naturally blur the edges of the past to extract only the most vital lessons.
But sometimes, that biological blurring goes to terrifying extremes, and our brains collectively invent things to protect us from trauma. During the horrific Grenfell Tower fire in the UK, multiple eyewitnesses vividly recalled a miraculous event. They went on television and described seeing a baby drop from the top floors of the burning high-rise, only to be safely caught by a bystander on the ground.
It was this powerful narrative of hope amidst an overwhelming tragedy, and people genuinely believed they saw it happen.
But months later, physicists ran the calculations on that scenario. They demonstrated that catching a human infant drop from that altitude would generate a localized force of impact so severe it would be physically devastating to both the baby and the catcher.
Yeah, the event was physically impossible.
Right. The eyewitnesses had experienced collective memory hallucination. The trauma and cognitive dissonance of watching the fire was so severe that their brains literally manufactured a hopeful narrative to prevent psychological collapse.
Which loops us right back to our opening scenario about the falling cat.
Oh, yeah.
The brain hallucinates a miracle about a falling baby because it cannot process the horror while simultaneously ignoring the genuine, bizarre physics of a falling feline. A cat can survive a 32-story drop because of a mechanism involving terminal velocity and surface area to mass ratio.
Right, they spread out.
Exactly. As the cat falls, it spreads its limbs out like a parachute, increasing its aerodynamic drag. Because its mass is relatively low compared to its surface area, it stops accelerating and hits terminal velocity at a non-fatal speed. A baby's density and lack of reflexive spreading make a similar outcome impossible. Our memory filters out the cold truth of physics to shield our emotions.
And the problem we face today is that our modern environment is actively short-circuiting these natural filters. We rely on the friction of the real world, the pain, the resistance, the physical limitations, to tell us what is real and what is meaningful. And technology is meticulously engineering that friction out of existence.
We really need to define friction in this context. Friction is the effort required to achieve a desired outcome. For hundreds of thousands of years, human biology evolved to push against physical and social resistance. Overcoming that friction is the literal mechanism that generates a sense of purpose. When you remove it, you trigger a crisis of meaning.
You can physically feel this lack of friction rewiring your nervous system. Think about phantom phone vibrations. Your body has become so neurologically entwined with a frictionless device that you experience a Pavlovian response to a notification that isn't even there.
Right. Your leg feels a vibration purely out of conditioned anticipation.
Yeah. We are filtering our physical presence through these devices. People will travel thousands of miles to stand in the Louvre in front of the Mona Lisa, and instead of experiencing the moment, they hold up a screen or wear camera-enabled smart glasses to capture a digital copy. The friction of being present is replaced by the ease of recording.
There is an illuminating analysis of 200 science fiction novels that looked at post-scarcity societies' future worlds, where advanced AI and robotics have entirely eliminated hunger, poverty, and the need for manual labor. The researchers found that in 59% of those stories, the central plot revolved around a crisis of meaning.
Wow, almost 60%.
Yeah. When the struggle for basic survival is solved, the human brain demands to know survival for what?
It's the chess paradox. Today, a chess engine on a standard smartphone can effortlessly dismantle the greatest human grandmaster in the world. The machine has solved the game perfectly, yet millions of humans still actively play chess against each other. Why? Because they are not playing to compute the mathematically flawless move. They are playing specifically because they crave the cognitive resistance. They want the friction of trying to outsmart another flawed human.
But capitalism and consumer technology are fundamentally in the business of eradicating friction. You no longer have to hunt, forage, or even cook. You can just open DoorDash and have calories delivered to your door in 15 minutes.
And it deeply infects how we view human relationships and ourselves. Dating applications like Tinder or Grindr have gamified human connection, turning romance into a frictionless, endless catalog of faces to swipe through. And it's worth noting that this ecosystem is heavily centralized. A single corporate entity, the Match Group, owns an enormous monopoly on these platforms.
Right, they have industrialized the removal of romantic friction.
Exactly. And this extends to our self-image, too. People are utilizing AI filters like Facetune or engaging in extreme online trends like looks maxing to digitally shave down jaw lines and artificially smooth skin. The goal is to optimize physical reality until it matches the frictionless perfection of a digital avatar.
This drive for optimization forces us to look at how different societies engineer their cultural engines at a macro level. Like, when comparing the United Kingdom to the United States, you see two completely different approaches to managing societal friction.
Yeah, looking at this purely from a structural standpoint, the data paints a stark contrast. The UK system is designed to heavily mitigate catastrophic individual friction. They rank significantly higher in metrics like universal health coverage, statutory paid holidays, and maintaining much lower incarceration rates.
Right, the system intentionally introduces economic friction at the corporate and state level through higher taxes and regulations to establish a baseline social safety net.
Conversely, the United States utilizes a completely different optimization model.
Oh, completely. If the UK were admitted as a US state, its GDP per capita would rank 51st, behind every single existing state. The US engine is tuned for relentless financial output and rapid technological innovation. It accepts a high degree of individual friction, meaning less social safety net and higher personal risk as the necessary fuel to drive extreme capitalist productivity.
So neither system is objectively perfect. They simply use friction as a tool to optimize for entirely different societal values.
Exactly.
But taking a step back, this entire obsession with engineering the struggle out of our lives feels really dangerous. If we use technology to systematically remove all the friction, aren't we just moving into a state of cognitive zero gravity? In physical zero gravity, without the constant resistance of the Earth's mass pulling against your body, your bones lose density and your muscles rapidly atrophy. If we don't have to push against anything, not for food, not for romance, not for knowledge, doesn't our capacity for resilience just waste away?
That is the core biological dilemma. Value is derived from effort. When you successfully remove the friction from the process of living, the life itself ceases to hold weight.
So if this hyper-connected, frictionless environment is causing an epidemic of anxiety and a crisis of meaning, what is the biological countermeasure? The answer is that we are moving away from treating the software of the mind, and we are starting to manually hack the hardware of the body.
Yes. We are seeing a massive paradigm shift away from traditional talk therapy and standard SSRI medications. The medical community is increasingly leaning into neuromodulation, the use of electrical and chemical interventions to directly rewrite the nervous system.
For decades, the dominant narrative was the chemical imbalance theory of depression, the idea that patients simply lacked sufficient serotonin. That theory is now widely considered incomplete, if not largely debunked.
Right.
Historically, before we had precise tools, people fought mental illness through blunt force. Winston Churchill famously battled severe, paralyzing depression, which he referred to as his black dog. His coping mechanism was literal, manual friction. He would go out and lay 200 bricks a day, forcing his physical body to generate the resistance his mind desperately needed to anchor itself.
Today, instead of laying bricks, we use magnetic fields to target the brain's anatomy. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, utilizes a localized electromagnet placed on the scalp. It pulses magnetic fields that penetrate the skull and induce tiny electrical currents in specific brain regions.
Wait, so they just pulse magnets into your head?
Yes. These currents depolarize neurons, effectively forcing dormant or rigid neural pathways to reset their firing patterns. It can manually inhibit an overactive anxiety center or stimulate an underactive mood center.
And the clinical results sound like science fiction. There are case studies of patients rating their generalized constant anxiety as a 9 out of 10, undergoing targeted TMS and dropping to a 1. One patient suffered from chronic insomnia, received an intervention, and was able to lie down and fall deeply asleep within 5 minutes.
And the acceleration of this technology is staggering. Initially, TMS required daily clinic visits for 6 to 8 weeks to slowly bend the neural pathways. Now, researchers are utilizing the one-day protocol.
Oh, this is the one with the old antibiotic, right?
Yes. They administer a neuroplasticity agent specifically, an old tuberculosis antibiotic called D-cycloserine. In the brain, this compound interacts with receptors that control synaptic plasticity, essentially warming up the clay of the mind and making the neural connections hypermalleable. Once that window is open, they can compress weeks of magnetic stimulation into a single intensive day of treatment.
But treating the brain like a circuit board carries profound risks. The human nervous system is an intricate, interconnected web. If the targeting is slightly off or the magnetic dose is too high, the side effects can be severe. Patients have reported bouts of temporary extreme insomnia. There are even cases of temporary sexual dysfunction.
That occurs because you simply cannot isolate systems perfectly. The sympathetic nervous system controls your fight or flight response, which governs anxiety, but that same baseline arousal system is deeply entangled with sleep regulation and physiological arousal.
So it's all connected.
Right. If a magnetic intervention aggressively dials down the sympathetic nervous system to cure a panic disorder, it might inadvertently dial down the signals required for normal sexual function or sleep rhythms.
And the interventions are moving beyond the skull and right into the neck. Doctors are utilizing the stellate ganglion block, or SGB. They inject a local anesthetic directly into a bundle of sympathetic nerves located in the neck. The chemical blockade temporarily halts the nerve signals, forcing the entire sympathetic nervous system to reboot, almost like shaking a sketch to clear a frozen image.
Which is incredible.
It is. Patients have tracked their biometrics afterward and seen a 30% overnight boost in their heart rate variability. And just to clarify for the listener, a high heart rate variability, or HRV, is an excellent marker of health. It means the time between your heartbeats is constantly adapting to your environment, indicating a resilient, relaxed nervous system rather than one locked into a rigid rhythm of chronic stress.
We are also seeing targeted electrical stimulation of the vagus nerve. By placing a specialized device in the symbiconche, a specific fold of cartilage inside the ear that directly accesses the vagus nerve, practitioners can send precise electrical currents down into the body to treat severe aura-inducing migraines. They are entirely bypassing the psychological software and directly manipulating the biological hardware.
Which forces us to confront a really foundational question about all of this. Are we just hooking ourselves up to 9-volt batteries to treat the symptoms of a sick, hyperdigital society? Is the frictionless, tech-obsessed environment the actual disease, and neuromodulation is just a high-tech painkiller? Or are we looking at the true, necessary medical future of human mental health?
Honestly, the reality is that it is a combination of both. We have rapidly engineered a modern world that is completely misaligned with our evolutionary biology. And rather than abandoning the technology, we are utilizing advanced biology to force our nervous systems to tolerate the world we built.
So let's distill this entire deep dive down for you. We began by pulling back the curtain on language, revealing how the linguistic frameworks we use, from the evolution of the word soon to the financial constraints of early text messaging act as invisible filters that shape our behavior and culture. We discovered that a flawless memory is actually a biological trap, and that the human brain's natural ability to prune the noise and forget the past is a profound evolutionary advantage.
We examined how the relentless technology-driven removal of daily friction is starving us of the resistance we need to generate meaning in our lives.
And finally, we explored how, in the face of this frictionless modern anxiety, science is turning to magnetic fields, anesthetics, and targeted electricity to forcefully reboot the human nervous system.
It fundamentally changes how you view your interaction with reality. You are not a passive observer. Your mind is a heavily defended, highly biased editing room.
Which leaves me with a final, slightly terrifying thought for you to carry with you. We know that artificial intelligence struggles because it lacks a natural forgetting mechanism. If consumer technology eventually achieves the ultimate goal of frictionless living, say, creating ambient AI or neural implants that flawlessly record every single moment, conversation, and emotion of your entire life, will humans have to intentionally write code for synthetic forgetting? If the technology never forgets, will we have to program artificial blind spots into our own digital memories just to preserve our sanity?
Because if we fail to build the friction of forgetting into our flawless machines, we will inevitably be crushed under the weight of our own perfect past.
It's a powerful reminder that the most vital part of the picture is often what the filter leaves out. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Do yourself a massive favor today. Put the device in your pocket, go out and find something difficult to accomplish, and enjoy the vital, messy friction of the real world. We'll see you next time.